shoulder about Cambridge. I grew up, really working class in Canada. I always thought Cambridge was really, really posh. And I don't think I realized how posh it was till I got here and went to the toilet in the HPS department. Now, most toilets have a little warning sign: don't throw toilet paper and paper towels down the sink. But at the HPS department in Cambridge, they warn you not to throw loose tea leaves down the sink. So yeah, a little bit out of my depth. I'm doing my master's at UCL, and loosely speaking, my research is in the history of women scientists, or scientists as I like to call them. And I recently got asked by a history of science professor why, as a man, I am researching women in science. And I was a little bit incredulous, and I looked him up and down, and I thought, this happens far too often. And then I just said something like, well, that's a fair question coming from an ancient Greek astronomer like yourself. Slow burn that one. That was a slow burn. But seriously, we've got a woman problem in science, not a Tim Hunt woman problem, but a woman problem is in there's not enough of them, and I'm really curious to know why. What's happened? What's happened through history that has created this environment where women aren't able to compete? Aggressive, really, but to work at the same level. What's the difference? So that's what my research is in. Like many historians of science, I got kind of stuck on the Victorians. Because they're weird. They're really, really weird. To be honest, I haven't written any jokes because the Victorians are far more hilarious than I can ever be. I mean, who wants to go bathe with arsenic soap? It's bizarre, completely bizarre. Now, the Victorians didn't really think that women could and or should, depending, do science, which we all know is untrue. But in the end of the 19th century, women started to get increased access to education. They started going, we had Girton College and Newnham College and, London School of Medicine. And other than teaching school, not really a huge amount of career opportunities for women. So they set their sights on medicine, which made sense. They had already had careers as nurses historically, caring for sick people was a woman's job, etc., etc., etc. So they set their sights on medicine as the kind of first professional scientific career that women could do. And as you can imagine, the menfolk, they got a bit worried. I think in the animal kingdom, they call it territorial defensiveness. And around the same time, literature started appearing that warned against the perils that would come to women's physiology by pursuing rigorous education. And these two may be related, but I'm not going to say yes or no. One of these people was Henry Maudsley. Some of you might be familiar with him. He's a pioneering British psychologist. He started an asylum in London, and he decided it was his moral duty to warn people, these fervent people who were fighting for education for women, against the perils that would come to them. And he wasn't the only one. There was an American physician, former Harvard professor, who had several women patients who had these problems with them, and he traced it back, and apparently the root of their medical conditions was rigorous education. So he published a volume called Sex and Education. Don't get excited, it's not what you think. I checked. But you might have a bit of an understanding why I think people might misunderstand my browser history. And I'm going to pull up my notes because I have to read some of this. So in it, he asserts that a number of female graduates who had been permanently disfigured by improper study. And I'm thinking, are their fingers falling off when they look at their lecture notes in the wrong order? I don't really understand this. So he goes on. If these causes should continue for the next half century, he says, and increase at the same ratio as they have for the last 50 years, it requires no prophet to foretell that the wives who are to be the mothers in our republic must be drawn from transatlantic homes. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the start of the mail-order bride industry. He goes on to paint us a little picture. The girl enters upon the hard work of school or college at the age of 15 years or thereabouts, when the function of her sex has perhaps been fairly established, ambitious to stand high in class, she pursues her studies with diligence, perseverance, and constancy. So far, so good. Allowing herself no days of relaxation or rest out of the school days, paying no attention to the periodical tides of her organization. That's a new one for me, but it certainly sheds some new light on the concept of a flowchart. Unheeding a drain that would make the stroke oar of the university crew falter, he threw that in for Cambridge. For a time, all seems to go well with her studies. She triumphs over male and female competitors, gains the front rank, and is stimulated to continue exertions in order to hold it. I'm reading this and I'm like, that's awesome. You go, girl. But then shit gets a little weird and very dark. But in the long run, nature, which cannot be ignored or defied with impunity, asserts its power. Excessive losses occur, health fails, she becomes a victim to aches and pains, and is unable to go on with her work, and compelled to seek medical advice. Restored to health by rest from work, a holiday at the seaside, not a my stipend, suitable treatment, she goes back to her studies to begin again the same course of unheeding work until she has completed the curriculum, and leaves college a good scholar, but a delicate and ailing woman, whose future life is more or less one of suffering. It sounds to me like she's trying to pursue a career in academia. But he goes on. For she does not easily regain the vital energy which was recklessly sacrificed in the acquirement of learning. And now I have a picture of Skeletor hovering over her while she's studying, sucking up her life force. The special functions which have related to her future offices as a woman, I really think he means baby-making abilities in that sense, but, and the full and perfect accomplishment of which is essential to sexual completeness has been deranged at a critical time. If she is subsequently married, she is unfit for the best discharge of maternal functions, and is apt to suffer from a variety of troublesome and serious disorders in connection with them. In some cases, the brain and the nervous system testify to the exhaustive efforts of undue labor. Nervous and even mental disorders declare themselves. I really need to get this guy to write my mitigating circumstances for me. Like, I can't imagine. But it wasn't just threatened men of medicine that were espousing this, if I may say, bullshit. You had Eliza Linton. She was part of the Ethnographic Society. T.H. Huxley wanted to kick all the women out of the Ethnographic Society, and so she tried to counter it. And I thought, yeah, this is great. Yeah, we've got some suffrage happening here. This is gonna happen. Turns out the only reason that she wanted to be in there in the first place was because she was a social Darwinist, just like Huxley, and she thought, just like Huxley, that women should be educated so that they can surpass the doll phase of evolution and be smart enough to be a good conversationalist for the men that they encounter in society. Which sounds very undoll-like to me. I've lost myself. Sadly, despite all this progress that women made in education, something happened around the turn of the 20th century. The nation as a whole was in a general state of ill health, and somehow public opinion had decided that this was the fault of women who were educating themselves. And all of a sudden, science was being removed from girls' schools and being replaced with domestic science, needlepoint, and cookery and such. And I'm going to kind of leave you with a quote that I found in a 1906 issue of Parents' Review, and kind of tells the whole story. It was noted that women from all classes were inefficient and unhousewifely, that girls tended to reject their roles as mothers by condoning deliberate and wicked means to avoid the legitimate consequences of marriage. Been doing that all my life, frankly. That breastfeeding was on the decline, and that academic girls had become unmarriageable through losing their looks and manners. Yes. Fortunately today, as I think can be demonstrated by approximately 50% of the people in this room, that your organization is just fine. I don't need evidence. You can, that's a bit personal. But thank you very much for laughing and for putting up with me for approximately, hopefully, 8 minutes. Cheers.